Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the actual, proven science of what really makes us happy. And we're not talking about those generic self-help platitudes here. We're going to rely on decades of hard psychological and sociological research. Have you ever felt like you're checking all the right boxes in life, doing everything you're supposed to do, but you still aren't quite as happy as you'd expect? Well, looking at the data, you are absolutely not alone.
So we kind of have to start with a fundamental, maybe slightly uncomfortable question about the human condition. Why do so many of us struggle to find lasting joy despite our absolute best efforts? I mean, in the United States alone, research shows that around 40% of college students report being too depressed to function most days. And honestly, we're seeing very similar trends across older generations too. Clearly, we're doing something wrong when it comes to our pursuit of joy, right?
Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to cover 1. How our brains lie. 2. The secret of connection. 3. Entering the flow state. And 4. Rewiring through gratitude.
Let's jump right into Section 1, How Our Brains Lie, and the mental glitches keeping us dissatisfied. Yale psychologist Dr. Laurie Santos points out that we all suffer from this thing called miswanting. Basically, it means our minds constantly trick us into chasing the totally wrong goals. We have these incredibly strong gut intuitions about what will bring us joy, but the data proves that our intuitions are frequently just dead wrong. We think to ourselves, oh, if I could just afford that shiny new car or get that massively upgraded house, I'd be set. But the reality is, even if we got exactly what we wanted, the joy simply wouldn't last nearly as long as we expect.
It's the classic treadmill trap. We spend our entire lives chasing money, chasing a promotion, chasing status. But research actually shows that once you have enough money to just meet your basic needs, piling on more doesn't skyrocket your happiness. Instead, our brains just set a new reference point. We look at our shiny new salary, and then we immediately compare it to what our neighbor makes. Or we move into that new house and immediately notice the bigger one down the street. It literally leaves us continuously dissatisfied.
And that brings us to hedonic adaptation. Even when we hit our biggest goals, hedonic adaptation kicks in and we just get bored with our new reality. Think about it. When you first buy a brand new smartphone, it feels glorious, right? You're taking it out of the box, it's perfectly clean. But a month later, it's just your phone. Things that initially spike our happiness inevitably lose their luster over time. Plus, we suffer from this thing called an impact bias, which basically means we falsely assume that a good event is going to keep us happy for a really, really long time.
And here is the really harsh reality from Dr. Santos. Evolution built our brains for survival, not for a permanent state of bliss. As she explains, natural selection honestly doesn't care how we feel. It just wants us to survive and reproduce. Those nagging negative emotions, the fear, the sadness, the frustration, they're just evolutionary signals telling us to change our behavior or avoid a danger. They're perfectly normal to experience. But if we let them run the show unchecked, they'll completely prevent us from being happy.
So, moving on to Section 2, The Secret of Connection, brought to us by the Harvard Study of Adult Development.
If our brains are constantly working against us and chasing money and status is a dead end, what's the actual antidote? Well, to understand just how vital human connection is, we turn to the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And guys, this isn't just a quick online survey. This spans an incredible 85 years of continuous research. It's essentially the holy grail of data on human well-being.
It's literally the longest scientific study of happiness ever conducted. Starting all the way back in Boston in 1938, researchers meticulously tracked over 2,000 people. They followed the original participants, then their kids, the baby boomers, and beyond, meticulously documenting their health, their triumphs, and their biggest failures, all to isolate the true, fundamental determinants of a good life. And what the study directors discovered is amazing. The absolute greatest predictor of our physical health and our mental well-being is the strength of our relationships. It wasn't their cholesterol levels, it wasn't their DNA, and it certainly was not their accumulated wealth. The people who are most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were actually the healthiest people at age 80.
The data definitively shows that career achievements simply cannot replace the value of deep social connections. Professional success alone, completely insufficient. The happiest people in that Harvard study actively fostered their relationships, friendships, romantic partnerships, co-workers, and family. We often suffer from what psychologists call under-sociality. That's really just a fancy way of saying we constantly underestimate how good connecting with someone will actually make us feel. But maintaining these bonds, it requires active, continuous practice.
Okay, let's look at Section 3.
Entering the flow state and the psychology of optimal experience.
Now, obviously, we can't spend all our time socializing. So how do we find happiness in our solo tasks and our hobbies? Well, psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi identified flow as that optimal experience where you are so completely absorbed in an activity that time just seems to completely melt away. Think of a musician totally lost in a guitar solo, or a coder deep in a complex problem. You probably know it as being in the zone. It's this intense, focused concentration on the present moment where the activity itself becomes the reward.
But flow isn't just an accident. You can't just stumble into it. It requires 3 specific conditions. First, you need clear goals, so your brain has structure. Second, you need clear, immediate feedback. You have to know if what you're doing is actually working right then and there. And third, and absolutely most importantly, there has to be a perfect balance between the challenge of the task and your own personal skills. This table is a great way to visualize it. You only find flow when both your skill level and the challenge are high. If you try something super easy and you lack skill, you just feel apathy. If the challenge is massive but your skill is low, you get incredibly anxious. If you're highly skilled but the task is way too easy, you're just bored. But when a high challenge meets your high skill, boom. That's where the magic happens. Your brain is entirely maxed out and literally has zero computing power left to process anxiety or even watch the clock. Interestingly enough, people who develop an autotelic personality naturally seek out these high-challenge scenarios because they find the process itself so rewarding. The term actually comes from the Greek autos, meaning self, and telos, meaning goal. So the activity is its own goal. These individuals show immense curiosity and they persist through failure because they aren't driven by external rewards like money or praise. And that sets them up to experience flow much more frequently.
Bringing us to our final part, Section 4, Rewiring Through Gratitude. Let's talk about actionable steps for a healthier mind.
We've seen the data, so now let's look at how to actually hack your brain's flawed operating system. Dr. Santos calls these rewirements. They are purposeful behaviors designed to override our mind's natural biases. By consciously engaging in practices that shift our focus to our blessings rather than our hassles, we can literally rewire our habits for a way better psychological outcome. We're actively training our brains to focus on the good stuff.
And the results of these rewirements are staggering. The American Psychiatric Association found that engaging in gratitude exercises for just 6 weeks yielded positive effects that lasted a full 6 months. Think about that for a second, a 6-month mood boost from just a few weeks of effort. There's also another amazing study out of the Netherlands showing that just 15 minutes of daily gratitude training resulted in sustainable long-term relief for people dealing with moderate symptoms of anxiety and depression.
So what do we actually do? Here are the exact evidence-based steps the APA recommends to boost your gratitude. First, take time to journal daily about 3 to 5 good things. Next, write a letter of thanks to someone who positively impacted your life. You can also practice simply saying thank you more sincerely in your daily interactions. Or try spending a week taking a different perspective. Actively imagine your life without something you normally take for granted, like your reliable car or even clean running water. It literally forces your brain to appreciate your current baseline.
Oh, and we absolutely cannot forget the mind-body connection. Moving your body for just 20 minutes a day is another heavily proven way to regulate your emotions. It gives your brain the physiological support it needs to maintain a positive baseline. You don't have to become an ultramarathoner to be happy, guys. Simple, consistent daily movement is more than enough to work wonders.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, very important question to think about. What specific habit will you rewire today to build your own true happiness? Are you going to pick up the phone to build a connection? Are you going to seek out a challenging task to find your flow? Or will you simply write down 3 things you are grateful for right now? The science is incredibly clear, but putting it into practice, well, that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.